final part of the 8th chapter. So I looked into it. What he's trying to do is pitch a perfect game, which means that he doesn't allow anybody to get on base. So either he strikes them out or they can't get to base because his outfield catches the ball or gets them out on base. Carlos put down 2 fingers, asking for the curveball. Michael wanted to call timeout and kill him. Instead, he shook him off, vigorously this time, hoping he got the point. Carlos slouched again and went through the other signals, trying to find something they could both agree on. Michael already had 2 outs in the 7th inning. The last batter he had to retire was the big number 3 hitter, and they were running out of things to throw him. Michael took a deep breath, wishing he'd heard back from Grandma Cat before the start of the half inning. Carlos put down a single finger, a fastball, but he didn't indicate right or left. A fastball right down the middle to Bob Smith Ford's best hitter. Well, it was something he certainly wouldn't expect, but he was too good a hitter not to do something with it, even if he didn't see it coming. No, Michael would nibble at the corners of the strike zone before he gave him a fastball to hit. He took a sign he liked from Carlos and pitched. He meant it to be low and inside, but it wasn't perfect. The ball came back toward the plate more than he meant it to, and he watched in horror as the big hitter attacked it, driving the ball deep to right center. Raul broke right, and Tim Clemens in center broke left, and the big crowd sitting in the bleachers rose to their feet. All Michael could do was watch as the ball sailed farther and farther, and Raul and Tim drew closer and closer. Then Raul was sliding out of the way so he wouldn't hit Tim, and Tim was reaching as high and far as he could, and both players went tumbling as the ball disappeared between them. And then Tim Clemens popped up triumphantly with the ball clutched in his glove. The umpire, who'd run all the way out past second base to watch, signaled out with his fist. The audience cheered, and Michael waited on the infield to rub Tim's hat around on his head in thanks. 21 outs, 6 more to go, because they have 2 more innings. Michael went to a solitary place at the end of the bench, and the wall of silence descended again between him and his teammates. They sat so far away now, Michael felt like he had some disease no one else wanted to get. No one but David, who stood behind him eating a snow cone. "There's a reporter here," David said, "from the Carnacy Courier. Somebody called him." "David, what did Grandma Cat say? You talked to her, right?" David shrugged. "She said you had to just keep doing whatever it was you were doing." Michael grabbed the chain-link fence with his fingers and rattled it. "That's not good enough," he said, drawing stares from a couple of his teammates, who just as quickly looked away. Michael lowered his voice. "David, I can't just keep doing what I've been doing. They've seen it all before, and my arm is getting tired. What am I supposed to do?" "I don't know," David said. He shrugged again and took a bite of a snow cone. If the chain-link fence hadn't been there, Michael would have so killed his brother. Instead, he tried to calm himself down. He would kill David after the game. "Just, look, tell her to come down here, all right? Tell her I need to talk to her." David took another bite of his snow cone and walked away. "Adopted. He has to be adopted," Michael muttered. His turn to bat came up again that inning, but this time he didn't care. He took his bat and his helmet and stood in the batter's box. He was hardly aware of the pitches coming his way. Instead, he was looking at the players in the field he knew he had to face again. The third baseman, the shortstop, the pitcher, the left fielder, the right fielder, the second baseman. What did he know about each of them that he could use to get them out? And they were looking at him right now, trying to figure out how they were going to get a hit. The umpire called strike 3, and Michael walked to the dugout, where Coach Clemens was clapping and exhorting the next batter to get a hit. Ignoring Michael completely, he didn't care. He didn't want to talk to anybody anyway. 1 out later, Michael was on the mound. Foul territory was now full of people. The crowd so large there was an audible murmur from them. The opposing coach clapped and urged his players to get a hit. Michael's own teammates stood silently behind him, waiting for whatever would come. Michael squeezed the ball in his hand so tightly it hurt. He worried that he didn't have enough gas left, that he didn't have any more tricks up his sleeve, that he'd make a mistake or somebody would get lucky. Then he would be a failure in the eyes of however many people were watching. He called timeout and walked around the mound once more. But Carlos didn't run out to meet with him, and none of the infielders came in to talk to him. He was in this alone. The ump gave him a moment, then Michael stepped back up and went at it. He got a fly ball to second from the first batter, a strikeout of the second, and a ground ball to third for the last hitter, and suddenly the inning was over, as easy as any he'd ever pitched. And he was 3 outs from perfection. The crowd cheered as he walked off the field, but he could sense the expectation in their voices. He went back and sat by himself at the end of the bench, wondering again if he had what it took to be perfect. David appeared again, eating a hot dog. "David, where's Grandma Cat?" "She won't come." "What?" "She says you're not supposed to talk to somebody with the perfect game. She won't even say perfect game. She just keeps working her way up and down the bleachers, touching all the wood." Remember when she did that when she was nervous before, how she would touch the bats? Michael leaned close to the fence and whispered to his brother, "I'm running out of ideas here. David, I don't know how I'm going to get the next 3 batters out. I don't even know how I got the last 3 batters out. She didn't say anything?" David took a bite of his hot dog and chewed on it, and Michael wished he could choke people with a force like Darth Vader. David finally swallowed. "She said there's a time and place for everything." "That's it? There's a time and place for everything? What's that supposed to mean?" David shrugged. "I don't know. So you think you want to play Atari later?" Michael didn't even bother to answer. On the field behind him, Adam grounded into the last out of the inning, and it was time for Michael to take the mound one last time. He looked around at the empty bench. The team had already left without him, none of them wanting to be the one to jinx it by jostling him or talking to him. Coach Clemens opened his mouth to say something to him as he passed, but instead just nodded. Michael walked out to the mound. The crowd burst into applause as he came out of the dugout, and he wondered if he was supposed to tip his cap. That didn't feel right, though. Like he'd be thanking them for applause he hadn't earned yet. Instead, he went to the mound and took a few light tosses with Carlos. The umpire seemed ready to give Michael as much time as he needed, but Michael just wanted to get it over with. He signaled the umpire he was ready, and the ump called, "Play ball!" Michael Flint felt like the loneliest boy in all of Brooklyn. He scratched at the dirt of the mound with his cleat, raised his glove to just under his eyes, and stared in at his catcher's signal. He turned, stepped, and threw as hard as he possibly could, and the ball flashed, a brilliant white thing in the midday sun, rocketing toward the catcher's mitt, and then over the catcher's mitt, and over the umpire, and into the backstop behind, where it thwacked into a pole. The crowd murmured, and Michael could hear their words in his head. "He's cracking. He's lost it. He can't be perfect." Carlos threw him a new ball, and Michael worked it over in his hands while trying to clear away the voices in his head. Those weren't the voices of the crowd. He couldn't really hear them. They were the voices inside him, telling him he couldn't do it. But why couldn't he? He didn't know what he was doing that was different from any other time he pitched. But even so, the magic that had been there all day long, why did it have to stop? He stepped off the mound, taking the time the umpire had been willing to give him before, and readjusted his hat while he gathered his thoughts. Maybe today was one of those days where everything just clicked. Maybe it had nothing to do with him at all. Maybe today was perfect. Michael climbed back up on the mound and shook off Carlos's signals until he had the one he wanted. After the first blazing pitch into the backstop, the hitter was expecting more of the same. So Michael threw the next pitch as slow as he could, aiming it right for the middle of the plate. The batter whiffed on it early enough to swing twice if he wanted to, and the crowd oohed. 1 ball, 1 strike. Now that the batter was off balance, Michael gave him another changeup, strike 2, and then the high heat to finish him off. 2 outs to go. The next batter was a pinch hitter, somebody he hadn't seen before, but the kind of guy who's not a starter for a reason. He flailed at the first pitch, and Carlos wisely called for a pitch away, and Michael got him fishing again for strike 2. Ahead 0-2, Michael threw the kid an inside pitch that was impossible to hit, but he swung at it anyway. Strike 3. 1 out to go. 1 batter left. Michael turned around on the mound, facing the outfield and his teammates. They watched him now, stared at him, and he could feel the eyes of everyone in Prospect Park. It was like they were holding their collective breath, waiting to see if perfection was possible. Michael couldn't decide if he wanted to know the answer or not, but he couldn't just walk away. He had to finish the game one way or another. He turned and faced home plate and a new pinch hitter. His first pitch was a fastball, and the batter took it for strike 1. Michael felt a surge of optimism. Maybe it was possible. Maybe he could be perfect. He just needed to push it that last little bit. He got the ball back and sent another fastball toward the plate. This one too high and too fast. So high and fast, Carlos had to go up to get it. Michael lost his hat, throwing it, and the batter didn't bite. Michael was pressing now, and he knew it, grabbing at the magic rather than letting it work on its own, but he was desperate. Michael got the ball back and picked up his hat, dusting it off. He pulled it back down over his mop of sweaty hair and took another deep breath, his grandmother's lone piece of advice coming back to him. There's a time and place for everything. Michael reached back, grabbed for some of the magic, but threw another fastball high. Ball 2. He was going to be patient with this batter, make Michael work for it. The Bob Smith Ford coach had saved his best for last. Michael could feel the sweat running down his back. He had put everything he had into those last 2 pitches, and he didn't have anything more. His fastballs were starting to feel like change-ups, huge red and white targets that were slow as Christmas coming. He couldn't speed it up, and he couldn't slow it down any further. This was it. This was all he had left. 2 balls and 1 strike. Michael couldn't afford another ball called here, so he took a little something off, though not so much as to make it a proper change-up, and aimed for the corner of the plate. A swing and a miss. He evened the count to 2 balls and 2 strikes. If there ever was a time to waste a pitch, this was it. But Michael still refused. If he threw a wide pitch well outside the strike zone, there was little chance this hitter would chase it, and all that would do was force the issue next pitch on a full count, where the batter knew he couldn't make the mistake, wouldn't throw a ball. Michael waved off the waste pitch signal Carlos gave him and nodded for the inside fastball. He tried to hit the corner, catching him looking. His arms like rubber, his legs like logs, Michael stepped into his windup and pitched it right where he wanted. The magic back. The batter flinched but didn't swing. The ball popped into Carlos's mitt. Michael felt relief beyond relief, could now see what kind of day it was, a perfect day, and started to jump for joy. And then the umpire called the pitch a ball. The crowd booed and hissed, but Michael knew it had been a close one. He put it out on the edge, hoping for a strike, the kind of pitch that had to be perfect. But he wasn't perfect. He was never going to be perfect. He had 26 outs, 3 balls, 2 strikes, and he was as close as perfection and imperfection as he was ever going to get. If he could freeze that moment, preserve it, he could forever be 1 strike away from glory. The applause for what he was doing never ending. The disappointment for what he had not done never felt. And that was when Michael Flint noticed what kind of day it was. He had glimpsed it a few seconds before when he thought the game was over, when he truly relaxed for the first time all day. He looked for it again now, and there it was, all around him. The kind of day where a little dirt on your hands felt good, where the high blue sky was just right for catching fly balls, where grounders always bounced into his outstretched glove. It had been that way all along, but it hadn't belonged to him or anybody else. It was baseball's day. A day when the earth said, "Here's the best I've got," and baseball said, "That's pretty good, earth, but I'll show you perfect." It was a day like Michael had never known, and he would never see again, and knew he would never see again. Like Sandy Koufax and his perfect game, it was a special gift in a special time in a special place, one that he shouldn't examine too closely. He would never duplicate, no matter how much he worked, no matter how hard he tried. It was the kind of perfect day that would come only when it wanted to, when the sun smiled and the grass laughed and the wind sang. It wasn't up to Michael anymore. He saw that now. He stepped back on the mound, worked his fingers into the right grip, shook Carlos off until he dropped 2 fingers for a curve, and let the ball fly. And that's the end, so we don't know if he had a perfect game or not. So I remember Mrs. Reinhardt telling me that when we were talking about the book. So I was thinking about if you have your packets at home and you wanted to fill them out, what you could write for this. I'm not sure. Maybe an Atari, which was kind of like a old school gaming system. You could draw that. I don't know. Maybe any of the food that his brother kept bringing down. I'm not sure. That's something that we might have to think about a little bit more. But if you have your packets at home, you can fill that in. So we have one more chapter left with 3 small chapters. So I will make sure that I continue to read those to you. All right. See you soon.